It was meant to be a quiet tribute to naval history, a dignified family gesture, a symbolic moment of continuity. But within seconds it became something else entirely. Cameras flashed, faces froze, and in a move no one saw coming, Lord Mountbatten's grandson stepped forward, not toward Queen Camilla, but toward Catherine, Princess of Wales. What happened next sent shockwaves through royal corridors and reopened wounds long thought buried. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The ceremony had been carefully choreographed for weeks, wrapped in reverence and guarded expectation. This was not just another royal appearance, it was a naval commemoration tied to the towering legacy of Lord Mountbatten, a figure whose influence still lingers in the bloodstream of the monarchy. The atmosphere carried the weight of history. The name Mountbatten is synonymous with discipline, command and sacrifice, and the gathering was meant to honor that lineage with solemn pride. At the center of it all stood the ceremonial naval sword, polished to brilliance, introduced not merely as an heirloom, but as a living symbol of loyalty and dynastic continuity. It represented authority earned through service, not inherited through convenience. Many believed the outcome was predetermined. As queen consort, Camilla's position within the hierarchy seemed to make her the natural recipient of such a gesture. Protocol whispered her name. Tradition appeared to favor her. For decades, she had fought to secure her place beside the king, enduring scrutiny, resistance, and relentless judgment. This moment, some assumed, would reinforce her legitimacy within the broader narrative of royal history. The expectation hung in the air like an unspoken agreement. And then the pivot happened. Lord Mountbatten's grandson did not hesitate. He did not falter. He stepped forward with intention, and instead of turning toward Camilla, he faced Catherine. The movement was subtle, almost gentle, yet it detonated like thunder within palace walls. The sword was placed into Catherine's hands in full public view, an unmistakable transfer of symbolic trust. For a fraction of a second, time itself seemed to stall. The silence was thick. Measured composure settled across Camilla's expression, but the shift was undeniable. She had not been acknowledged. She had been bypassed. The reaction rippled outward instantly. Observers exchanged glances. Commentators scrambled to interpret what protocol could not explain. Social media ignited with speculation before the ceremony had even concluded. This was no minor deviation. It was a message delivered without a single spoken word, and in royal politics, silence often speaks the loudest. William's presence only intensified the moment. His gaze met Catherine's briefly steady, assured, almost protective. It was not theatrical, not exaggerated, but it was there, a quiet reinforcement. Catherine did not appear triumphant. She appeared resolute. She accepted the sword, not as a prize, but as a responsibility. In that exchange, something shifted beneath the surface of the monarchy. The unspoken message crystallized with startling clarity. Legacy is not inherited through title alone, it is entrusted. And in that trust lay a deeper implication, one that reached far beyond a single ceremony and into the very architecture of royal power. But to understand why this single gesture carried the weight of a royal earthquake, we must revisit the shadow that still looms over the monarchy, Lord Mountbatten himself. Lord Louis Mountbatten was more than a naval hero. He was a kingmaker, a mentor, a strategist who shaped the future of the British throne. His assassination may have ended his life, but it never erased his influence. And now, decades later, his name has returned to the center of royal tension. Because this was never just about a sword, it was about who carries Mountbatten's blessing into the future. To understand the force behind that blessing, you have to understand the grip Mountbatten once held over the heart of the monarchy. His relationship with Charles III was not casual or ceremonial. It was formative, almost paternal. When Charles was uncertain, Mountbatten was decisive. When Charles hesitated, Mountbatten advised. He did not simply guide the young heir, he shaped him, carving into him a belief that monarchy was not a privilege, but a burden that demanded discipline, sacrifice, and strategic calculation. In Mountbatten's world, emotions were secondary. Duty was everything. He was relentless in his obsession with continuity. Royal marriages were not romantic stories to him. They were architectural decisions, pillars that either strengthened or destabilized the crown. He believed in alliances that secured the future, in unions that reflected prestige and resilience. Every conversation carried subtext, every suggestion held long-term consequence. He saw the monarchy not as a family drama, but as an institution that must outlive individual desire. That philosophy left a permanent mark on Charles, one that would later collide painfully with matters of the heart. Mountbatten's naval career amplified this authority. He was not merely respected, he was revered. Discipline, command, loyalty, these were not abstract ideals, but lived realities under his leadership. The uniform he wore symbolized order in a chaotic world, and that symbolism bled into how he viewed the royal household itself. The monarchy, in his eyes, should operate like a fleet, unified, obedient, strategically aligned. Weakness was dangerous. Division was fatal. Then came the assassination, a violent rupture that shattered not just a life, but a stabilizing force within the royal orbit. For Charles, the loss was devastating. It was not simply the death of a mentor, it was the removal of a compass. In the years that followed, choices were made without Mountbatten's guiding hand, and some would argue that those choices altered the monarchy's trajectory forever. The emotional weight of that loss lingered quietly, influencing decisions, loyalties, and regrets. And so the naval sword was never just polished steel. It was a private heirloom saturated with expectation. It carried Mountbatten's ideals, unyielding duty, controlled strength, unwavering commitment to the crown. To receive it publicly was to receive more than an artifact. It was to be symbolically aligned with his vision of royal endurance. His lineage, though no longer seated at the center of power, still commands quiet authority precisely because it represents that uncompromising standard. When his grandson placed that sword into Catherine's hands, it was interpreted by many as more than a ceremonial act. It felt like the passing of mentorship across generations, a subtle endorsement that transcended titles and current rank. It whispered of trust, of confidence, of a belief that someone must safeguard the institution with steadiness and resolve, and that whisper has grown louder with every passing hour. And yet, while history casts its long shadow, the present royal landscape is far more fragile than it appears. For years, Catherine has walked the tightrope of royalty, measured, poised, unshakable. But beneath the calm exterior lies something more powerful: strategic patience. She was never born into aristocracy, she married into destiny. And now, with a single ceremonial gesture, she may have inherited something far more potent than a title she inherited: Ted's symbolic command. From the beginning, her presence within the royal family was scrutinized, dissected, doubted. She did not arrive with ancient lineage trailing behind her name. She arrived with composure, with restraint, with an understanding that survival inside the monarchy requires endurance more than glamour. Every public appearance, every charitable visit, every carefully chosen word built a foundation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she transformed from the outsider into something far more consequential, a stabilizing force in an institution constantly tested by scandal and division. Her connection to naval charities and military families was not loud or performative. It was steady, consistent. She invested time, not headlines. She listened to stories of service and sacrifice, aligning herself with the very values that Lord Mountbatten had once championed: discipline, loyalty, duty above self. Over time, that association began to shape public perception. Catherine was not merely fulfilling engagements, she was embodying a tradition. And when Mountbatten's grandson placed that sword in her hands, it felt less like a surprise and more like a quiet confirmation of something that had been building for years. What makes her ascent so compelling is its subtlety. She never demanded authority, she earned trust. In moments of royal turbulence, family rifts, public criticism, generational clashes, she remained composed. Not passive, but deliberate. There is a difference. Strategic patience allowed her to weather storms without appearing weakened by them. That patience now looks less like caution and more like preparation. Because when the moment of symbolic command arrived, she did not hesitate. Public perception has shifted dramatically in her favor. Conversations that once framed her as supportive now frame her as central. Future queen is no longer a distant inevitability. It feels immediate, almost tangible. The sword became a metaphor for something deeper, a readiness to carry weight without complaint. a readiness to stand at the front of an institution that demands resilience, and perhaps most importantly, a readiness to do so without controversy. Being chosen outside the rigid structure of protocol carries emotional weight. This was not a gesture dictated by hierarchy, it was a gesture rooted in legacy. That distinction matters. It sugs to endorsement not of rank, but of character. And character, in a monarchy bruised by history, is priceless. The symbolism reverberates because it implies that continuity is safest in hands perceived as steady. William's silent reinforcement amplified that perception. He did not need to speak. His alignment with Catherine was evident in the unity they project, a partnership that feels modern yet grounded in tradition. Together, they present an image of stability that contrasts sharply with past turmoil. In that unity lies a powerful message to the monarchy itself. Catherine represents continuity without controversy, strength without spectacle, authority without aggression. Yet in every ascent, there are those who feel displaced. In every endorsement, there is someone who senses exclusion. The sword may have affirmed Catherine's place, but it also cast a shadow over others within a royal circle. But if Catherine's rise felt inevitable to some, for others, it was a calculated exclusion. Queen Camilla has endured decades of scrutiny to stand beside the king. She fought for legitimacy, for acceptance, for stability. Yet in one quiet but devastating moment, she found herself outside the circle of legacy. The cameras caught her composure, but what they couldn't capture was the deeper implication. This was not oversight. It was intentional. And in royal terms, intention changes everything. Her path to the throne was never smooth. It was carved through resistance, public anger, and years of careful rehabilitation. She weathered headlines that refused to forget the past. She absorbed criticism in silence, slowly reshaping her image through patience and unwavering support for Charles. Over time, the hostility softened, the narrative shifted. She was no longer viewed solely through the lens of controversy, but as a steady presence beside a king who had waited his entire life to That transformation was hard-earned, painfully earned. And yet, Mountbatten's ideology had never fully aligned with Camilla's place in royal history. He had envisioned alliances rooted in strategy, unions that reinforced institutional strength beyond emotional desire. Though he was gone long before Camilla took her place at the king's side, his philosophy lingered in the background, like an unspoken standard. For some traditionalists, that standard remained uncompromising. The ceremony, therefore, was not merely symbolic, it reopened a philosophical divide between past expectations and present realities. Speculation began almost immediately. Was this simply a personal decision by Mountbatten's grandson, or was it reflective of deeper currents within the palace? Royal symbolism is rarely accidental. Every gesture is examined, every omission dissected. The absence of Camilla in that defining moment felt deliberate to many observers. A bypass, not a blunder. Media commentators seized on the narrative, framing it as a deliberate snub, a signal that legacy and title do not always move in unison. Camilla's composure became a focal point. She did not react publicly. She did not allow visible disappointment to fracture her dignity. But composure can be deceiving. Beneath restraint often lies calculation or hurt. To stand as queen yet feels symbolically excluded from a legacy event tied so closely to royal continuity is no small matter. It creates isolation at the very height of status, a paradox that is uniquely royal. Elevated in rank, yet suddenly peripheral in meaning. Within palace corridors, whispers reportedly intensified. Advisors debated optics, loyalists questioned loyalties. If Mountbatten's lineage was aligning itself with Catherine, what did that imply for the balance of influence around Charles? Allegiances in a monarchy are rarely declared openly. They are felt, noticed, interpreted, and once interpreted, they begin to reshape internal dynamics. Camilla's long struggle for acceptance had culminated in a crown, but a crown does not automatically grant symbolic inheritance. That distinction cuts deep. It suggests that authority can exist without endorsement, that position can stand without emotional allegiance. The sword ceremony did not strip Camilla of her title, but it subtly challenged her connection to the monarchy's most guarded traditions. And so the tension simmers quietly, not explosive, not theatrical, but present. the kind of tension that alters conversations behind closed doors, the kind that lingers long after headlines fade. Because when legacy appears to bypass a queen, it forces the institution to confront an uncomfortable question about who truly carries its future. And as speculation ignited, one question echoed louder than all others: was this William's silent endorsement? William, Prince of Wales, said nothing, not a word, no clarification, no correction, and that silence was deafening. Because in royal politics, silence is rarely passive. It is deliberate, calculated, protective. Protective, as heir to the throne and guardian of the monarchy's future, William understood exactly what that sword represented. And perhaps more importantly, who it did not represent. For a man so closely allied with military tradition, symbolism is never accidental. William has long embraced the language of service discipline, loyalty, hierarchy. He understands that within the armed forces, rank matters, but respect matters more. The naval sword was not simply an heirloom, it was a declaration of trust tied to values he has publicly championed for years. His connection to veterans and active service members has shaped his identity as a future king grounded in duty rather than spectacle. So when that symbol bypassed Camilla and settled in to Catherine's hands, William did not appear surprised. He appeared prepared. That composure is telling. Over recent years, subtle distancing from certain palace dynamics has been quietly observed. Not rebellion, not confrontation, just distance. William has often projected a focus on modernization, streamlined leadership, and forward momentum. He rarely engages in overt palace disputes, preferring instead to let actions redefine direction. In that context, silence becomes strategy. By refusing to comment, he allowed the gesture to breathe, to resonate, to speak for itself. There is also the undeniable reality of partnership. William has consistently positioned Catherine not merely as supportive spouse, but as co-leader. Their public unity is deliberate, their coordination seamless. They move as a team, reinforcing one another without overshadowing. In a monarchy that has endured fractures, that unity carries immense weight. When Catherine accepted the sword, William's steady presence beside her amplified its meaning. It was not a lone endorsement, it felt like a shared mandate. Observers quickly began whispering about generational shifts. The monarchy is not static. It evolves, sometimes slowly, sometimes abruptly. With Charles III navigating the complexities of reign and personal loyalty, the emergence of William and Catherine as a cohesive future-facing force is increasingly visible. The sword moment intensified that perception. It hinted that legacy may already be leaning toward the next era, even while the current one remains firmly in place. For Charles, this dynamic introduces quiet tension. A king balancing devotion to his wife with responsibility to his heir faces an emotional equation few can comprehend. If William's silence was endorsement, it was also restraint. He did not challenge his father. He did not contradict the narrative. Instead, he allowed symbolic SME to operate independently. That is power in its most refined form, control without confrontation. And perhaps that is what makes this moment so potent. William understands that in monarchy, words can complicate what symbols clarify. A statement would have diminished the impact. Silence elevated it. By stepping back, he stepped forward. By saying nothing, he allowed the message to grow louder. That is restrained dominance. That is political instinct sharpened by years of observation. The implications are profound. If William is indeed shaping the future through quiet alignment and strategic positioning, then the sword was not just about honoring Mountbatten's legacy. It was about signaling readiness, about defining who stands at the center of the next chapter. And readiness, once signaled, cannot easily be retracted. But beyond palace walls, the public reaction transformed symbolism into something much bigger. Within hours, social media erupted. Headlines blazed. Commentators dissected every frame. For some, it was poetic justice. For others, a dangerous fracture. The British monarchy thrives on image, and this image was explosive. Catherine holding Mountbatten's sword became more than a photograph. It became a statement, and statements in a constitutional monarchy carry consequences. The image spread at a speed the palace could not control. Screens across the world lit up with analysis, admiration, outrage, and intrigue. Supporters of Catherine described the moment as historic, even prophetic. They saw strength in her composure, destiny in her acceptance, confirmation of what they had long believed, that she embodies the future of the crown with quiet authority. Memes, tributes, and commentary flooded digital platforms, transforming a ceremonial exchange into a cultural flashpoint. In an era where perception often outweighs protocol, that momentum mattered, yet the reaction was far from unified. Defenders of Camilla were swift to respond, framing the moment not as destiny, but as palace maneuvering. They questioned whether symbolism had been weaponized. Was this a carefully orchestrated narrative designed to sideline the Queen, or had Mountbatten's grandson acted independently, unaware of the political storm he would ignite? Accusations of internal politics began to surface, subtle at first, then sharper. The monarchy, already navigating generational transition, suddenly appeared divided along emotional fault lines. Analysts stepped into the debate with measured tones, dissecting the tension between symbolism and protocol. In strict hierarchical terms, Camilla's rank is clear, but monarchy has always operated in two realms: official order and emotional legitimacy. The sword blurred that boundary. It suggested that influence may not always align perfectly with title. That suggestion unsettled traditionalists who believe the stability of the crown depends on unwavering respect for hierarchy. For them, the gesture was a crack in the system, however small. At the same time, a younger generation viewed the moment through a different lens. They saw Catherine and William as representatives of a modern monarchy, adaptable, composed, less burdened by past controversies. To them, the sword symbolized renewal rather than rupture. It hinted at leadership grounded in relatability and consistency. In that narrative, the future felt secure, familiar, forward-looking, but beneath the praise and criticism lay a deeper question that refused to fade. Who truly represents royal legacy in this new era? Is it defined by marital status and formal title, or by public trust and symbolic alignment? The debate moved beyond individuals and into the identity of the monarchy itself. What does continuity look like in a world that demands transparency yet thrives on intrigue? Can tradition evolve without fracturing? The intensity of the reaction revealed something profound. The monarchy may be ancient, but it exists in a modern arena where every gesture is amplified. The sword was not controversial because it broke rules. It was controversial because it exposed uncertainty about the future. And uncertainty fuels speculation. As conversations grew louder online, the palace maintained restraint. No official clarification. No immediate narrative correction. That silence only intensified curiosity. Because when public reaction reaches a fever pitch and the institution remains composed, it signals that something deeper is unfolding away from cameras and commentary. And yet, behind closed doors, the conversation was far more personal than political. Royal walls do not echo, but they remember. And in the hours after the ceremony, conversations unfolded that may never be made public. Loyalty was questioned, lines were redrawn. Charles found himself balancing history and marriage, legacy and love, because this wasn't merely about a ceremonial sword, it was about the invisible hierarchy shaping the monarchy's next chapter. For Charles III, the moment carried a weight few could fully grasp. He has spent a lifetime navigating expectation, first as heir in waiting, now as king under relentless scrutiny. Mountbatten's influence shaped his youth, guided his sense of duty, and left a blueprint for how monarchy should endure. Yet standing beside him today is Camilla, the woman who shared his exile from public favor and ultimately his return to acceptance. In the privacy of reflection, those two forces, mentor and marriage, collided. The sword was not just handed to Catherine. It reopened questions Charles thought time had resolved. Where does loyalty lie when legacy and love pull in different directions? Camilla's private response remains known only. Why to a select few, but one truth is unavoidable. Exclusion stings more deeply in silence. Public composure can mask private reckoning. For a queen who endured decades of doubt to secure her place, the symbolism must have felt personal, not humiliating, not dramatic, but isolating. The distinction between title and trust can be razor thin. If Mountbatten's lineage signaled endorsement elsewhere, What did that imply about her standing within the monarchy's moral center? That question lingers, unspoken but potent. Meanwhile, William and Catherine appeared unified, measured, unwavering. Their strength lies not in overt declarations, but in alignment. They understand that monarchy thrives on perception as much as protocol. By maintaining calm solidarity, they reinforced an image of readiness. Some within the palace interpret that as reassurance, others may see it as quiet consolidation. Either way, their partnership has become a focal point of the institution's future, and that reality cannot be ignored. Advisors moved quickly behind the scenes. Statements were drafted and redrafted. Strategies were debated. Should the palace clarify the gesture or allow ambiguity to fade naturally? In moments like this, narrative control becomes critical. One misplaced comment can deepen division. One careless denial can validate suspicion. The firm, as it is often called, operates like a living organism, sensitive to imbalance, determined to restore equilibrium. But equilibrium requires careful calibration. The Mountbatten family, for their part, reportedly stood firm in their intent. The presentation, they implied, was rooted in personal conviction rather than palace politics. That insistence adds another layer to the unfolding drama. If the decision was independent, then its impact becomes even more profound. It suggests that influence is no longer centralized solely within the crown, but shared among those who carry historical weight. The long-term implications stretch beyond this single event. Ceremonial precedence, symbolic alignment, and perceived favor all shape the monarchy's internal rhythm. A gesture today can redefine expectations tomorrow. If Catherine's association with Mountbatten's legacy becomes normalized, future ceremonies may follow that pattern, and patterns once established are difficult to reverse. Within the House of Windsor, balance has always been delicate. Authority must coexist with affection. Tradition must adapt without fracturing. The sword may have appeared as polished steel, but its true edge lies in what it revealed: a monarchy navigating transition under the pressure of history and emotion. The equilibrium holds for now, but it trembles. And as the dust begins to settle, one final question lingers over the House of Windsor. In monarchies, power is rarely loud. It is subtle. It shifts quietly through symbols, alliances, and moments that seem ceremonial but redefine destiny. Lord Mountbatten's naval sword was never just steel and silver. It was memory, authority, endorsement. And by placing it in Catherine's hands, a message was etched into royal history. The future may already be choosing its queen. Royal tradition has always relied on symbolism as a form of prophecy. Crowns, rings, regalia each carries a narrative that extends beyond the present moment. They signal continuity. They hint at succession. They whisper about who is trusted to safeguard what cannot be replaced. The sword now joins that lineage of meaning. It did not announce a new era outright, but it suggested one, and suggestion within a monarchy is often more powerful than declaration. The act felt like a quiet rehearsal for something larger, something inevitable. For Catherine, the transformation has been gradual but undeniable. She entered the institute, protection as a consort, supportive and steady. Yet over time, she has evolved into something more formidable, a commander-in-waiting, not through confrontation, not through ambition displayed openly, but through consistency, resilience, and emotional intelligence. The sword did not create that evolution. It confirmed it. It acknowledged years of preparation disguised as patience. In that acknowledgement lies a turning point. She is no longer perceived merely as future queen by title. She is increasingly viewed as future queen by temperament. That shift inevitably casts uncertainty over Camilla's long-term influence. A queen's authority is complex, rooted in partnership with the reigning monarch. But legacy extends beyond the present reign. It stretches forward. If the public and powerful allies begin aligning their trust with Catherine, the gravitational center of influence subtly migrates. Camilla's journey to acceptance remains significant, but its permanence is now quietly questioned, not because her title weakens, but because symbolic momentum appears to gather elsewhere. At the same time, William's generational authority strengthens. He stands at the intersection of tradition and modern expectation. The sword moment reinforced his position as an heir not waiting passively, but preparing actively. Through unity with Catherine, he projects stability. Through restraint, he projects control. His era does not feel distant anymore. It feels imminent, and imminence changes behavior within the palace and beyond it. The monarchy itself stands at a crossroads between old wounds and new identity. Decades of turmoil shaped public trust. Scandals bruised the institution. Divisions strained perception. Yet within that turbulence, a recalibration has begun. The alignment of Mountbatten's legacy with Catherine suggests that history is not static. It adapts, it finds new vessels. What, guided Charles now appears to echo through a different generation. Mountbatten's influence, once personal to a young prince, resurfaces as symbolic endorsement of a future queen. Power dynamics are being reshaped without formal announcement. No decree was issued. No hierarchy officially altered. Yet influence has a way of migrating through gestures. If future ceremonies continue to place Catherine at the symbolic center of tradition, the pattern will solidify. And once solidify, it becomes expectation. Expectation then becomes reality. This is how monarchies evolve, not through revolution, but through resonance. A sword placed in steady hands, a silence that speaks louder than speech, a public ready to embrace a vision of continuity that feels both respectful of history and prepared for tomorrow. The question is no longer whether change is coming. The question is how far it has already progressed. Because if one ceremonial sword could redraw invisible lines of power, what happens when the crown itself becomes the next symbol to be passed forward? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.